Good evening. It is 7:03 p.m. on Wednesday, November 8th, 2017. This is the Plan Commission of the City of Evanston. I'm Jim Ford. I apologize for my voice. We have a quorum, so I will call the meeting to order. You have the agenda. Are there changes or additions to be made to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda will stand. You have the minutes of September 13th, 2017. Are there additions or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Goddard, second. Saul, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those minutes stand approved. You also received the minutes of August 30th, the joint meeting with the ZBA. But since those minutes were not posted, we will defer consideration of those until the November 29th meeting. If I can get down to the bottom of my stack here. The one piece of business that we have before us this evening, 17 PLND 0095, a request for direction regarding an amendment to the zoning ordinance to amend the special uses within the I-2 General Industrial Zoning District to include special educational institution - public. This issue comes to us by reference from the Planning and Development Committee, which got it in turn by reference from City Council. That being the case, I think the staff are the petitioners, although the staff are coming to us without a recommendation on the matter. I assume that we have representatives from the high school here who wish to speak to the issue. Are there members of the public who are going to wish to speak to the issue? If not, then I think we can run this a little bit less formally than we might otherwise. I'm going to ask staff to present the project, ask the school district to respond with whatever comments you wish to make. I think we'll save our questioning until both of those statements have been made, and then we can question both at the same time. Once that questioning is completed, if either the staff or the school feel the need to make a final statement, they'll do that. We will then close the public record and proceed to commission deliberation. So, Ms. Jones, are you doing this?
Yes, I am.
Go.
All right, so I'm going to provide a little bit of background regarding how we got to this point, and then speak more generally regarding the I-2 district itself. Earlier this year, during the summer, Evanston Township High School, or ETHS, applied for a zoning analysis and a special use permit in order to operate an alternative school for students with behavioral and emotional needs within the I-2 General Industrial District, specifically at 1233 Hartree. When zoning staff reviewed the application, they looked at definitions for a business or vocational school as well as educational institutional public, and determined that the proposed school fell under educational institution public, which is actually not permitted in the I-2 district. So subsequently, the application for a special use was rejected. To give a little bit more detail on the definitions for each of those uses, business or vocational school is defined as a privately owned or publicly owned post-secondary school other than a community college or four-year college university institution, providing occupational or job skills in a variety of technical subjects and trades for specific occupations. The educational institution public is defined as a publicly owned preschool, elementary school, middle school, or high school, or a facility owned by a public school district containing classrooms and libraries, offices, or similar support facilities for one or more of the following district purposes: educational services and related programs for faculty and staff and for students. Excuse me. Preschool-age children and their families. District administrative staff offices. And a zoning lot developed as an educational institution must be principally used for classrooms for preschool, elementary school, middle school, or high school students. As was briefly touched upon, at the September 11th meeting, the City Council referred the zoning for the potential alternative school to the Planning and Development Committee, which in turn, on September 25th, referred the item to this commission for a possible zoning ordinance map amendment or a text amendment to allow the proposed use. Tonight, we've got a proposal overview. There are generally two different options for this proposed project. The first being to rezone the property to a zoning district which would allow the proposed use, or to amend the permitted or special uses within the I-2 industrial district to permit the proposed use. Looking at the location for this particular project, and due to existing uses that are within the building that the proposed school would be going into, rezoning the property was seen as a less desirable option. ETHS has actually proposed creating a new use and provided the definition for a special educational institution public. And the definition of that would be a publicly owned special education secondary school or a facility owned or leased by a public school district, provided the owned or leased property remains subject to real estate taxes, providing occupational or job skills in a variety of technical subjects and trades for specific occupations, as well as classrooms and educational services and related programs for faculty and staff, and for secondary school students who are eligible to receive special education services. That proposed new use and definition could then be added to the list of special uses within the I-2 zoning district, or section 6-14-3-3. Now, going specifically to the I-2 district, the purpose of that district is to provide sites for light manufacturing and light industrial uses under controls that minimize any adverse effect on property in nearby residential, business, and commercial districts. As you can see from the list here, there are a variety of permitted and special uses, which is actually seen within the building itself. But there definitely are uses that are not necessarily seen within this particular district. They generally speak to more manufacturing or uses that are kind of related to that use. Specifically, the site, which is outlined in red, is one very large building that has a number of uses seen to the right of the map, including Temperance. At one point, Jan's Antiques was in that building. Evanston KinderCare has been in that building for a very long time. Goldfish Swim School, Have Dreams, the Erie Family Health Center, Prayer Garden Ministries, Rimlin, Allegra Marketing, Print and Signs, Tapes Unlimited, Like Management, the Samick, which is a kitchen supply business, Kerr Concrete Designs, and Sugar and Spice Extraordinary Sweets, which is...
Forgive me, I'm having a hard time with the outlined in red. Have we got a pointer?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's here.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah.
Now it pops out at me.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. And this is the southeast intersection of Dempster and
And Hartree, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So that's the general location of the site in question here and the uses in that particular building. Taking a step back and looking citywide, these are the locations where there is I-2 zoning currently in place. There are 4 different locations. This larger circle here is where the proposed school would be located. And that's the general West End Industrial Zoning District. We have an area behind where Target currently is in the southwest portion of the city, On the far southeast corner, this is generally the CTA train track, so not really much in the variety of uses there. And then a small amount of manufacturing use a little bit further north of there.
Where is that?
That is, let me zoom in a little bit.
Oh, yes, of course.
Right.
Okay. That's where the transfer station is, yes?
It's around in
there.
there, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, moving forward, should the commission decide to move forward with a text amendment, these are the standards that would have to be met per section 6-3-4-5 of the city code. You are pretty familiar with those. I can go through those, or you can wait. So that's the general overview of what is proposed this evening.
Thank you. Right, who's going to speak or speak first for the school district? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Rodino. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the district. Been with the district for 11 years and was with the City of Evanston for 10 years before that in the Finance Department. We are happy to present to you tonight regarding a project that we really believe in. And I don't know, I could talk all night, so we brought some, I won't, but we brought some boards that we would love to show you, just kind of some basic ideas of what we'd like to do with the space. But I think most importantly, you probably want to know why this particular space. And I just want to let you know that it's not the first space we looked at. We did look at 2 other prominent spaces in the community. We had a large engineering study done on space near Church and McCormick that was previously Shore School.
My apologies for the interruption. Sorry, Mario Trudeau, Corporation Counsel or Assistant City Attorney. We need an oath of everyone that's going to be speaking. We didn't take an oath.
Oh, of
Chairman.
course, I'm sorry.
Okay.
As long as this is a public hearing. If you plan to speak or if you may be asked to speak, please raise your right hand. You don't have to stand up, but you may if you wish.
We're taking this very seriously.
Promise to tell the whole truth in this proceeding.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mario.
So as I was saying, we have looked at a few other properties. This particular property had been off and on our radar for about 1.5 years. So I just want you to know that this was not the first place we looked, but we are very concerned about the proximity of this program to our actual campus. So just a little background, we currently have about 90 students. This information was in the fact sheet that I think you received in your packet, but I just want to hit a few of the highlights. We currently have about 90 students who receive daily services, not only off campus, but outside the city of Evanston. Our cost for those students is between $40,000 to $55,000 per year for tuition only. Then there's also the cost of transporting, sometimes on buses, sometimes on vans and taxis. Students can spend up to 60 minutes each way traveling to those alternative locations outside of the city. So we're proposing to create a special education day school that would start out servicing between 20 to 25 students. It would never, the maximum capacity would never exceed 40 students. I want to point out that this particular location is 3 blocks from our campus. So currently, the students who travel outside of Evanston are very limited in what they can participate in when their day program ends. They cannot come back to the school to participate in clubs, sports. I mean, those practice and meetings, fine arts, band, those all take place about 3:45 p.m. So many of those students are still sitting in their mode of transportation at the time that those events are taking place. In addition, a lot of these students could be transitioned back, whether partially or eventually fully, to the campus. But when they're located in Arlington Heights or Wilmette or Schaumburg or Highland Park, it's much more difficult to have an integration back into the campus for a few periods a day for those students. Again, this location is 3 blocks away, so that becomes much easier to incorporate those students and their desires to participate fully in our campus. This particular project would provide between 12 and 18 jobs in the community that currently don't exist now. They would not just be a transfer of our employees. We would actually be, filling new positions for this location, and we would be keeping the dollars that we currently send outside of Evanston within Evanston by creating those jobs to service those children in our programs. There is no request or proposal that there would be any loss of property taxes because we are renting the space. We're a taxing body as well, and we don't really have an interest in properties that come off the tax rolls because we're just like the city, a taxing body. So we would be leasing the space. There is not only our share of the property taxes in that rental payment, there is an escalator as property taxes increase. We pay our fair share according to the square footage of the building for that space. While this is an I-2 district, I just want to point out that Hartree Avenue is actually a divider between the I-2 district, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the R number, but it's a residential district on the west side of Hartree. So, we have students who live towards the west side of Hartree between Dempster and Maine. It's primarily housing. So we have other students who come to our building every day who are traveling, walking, however they get to our campus, that would be a very similar neighborhood, for these students coming to this school as well. The students are with other students who are traveling to the ETHS campus. So we've thought about, okay, well, Hartree is partially an industrial area. So we want to make sure that there's, safety, and these students, for the most part, are within walking distance of their location, but certainly some of them would be bused to the location. We plan to have 2 on-site security guards who would monitor entry and exit from the buses. Because it's a small number of students, it wouldn't really create a traffic flow issue. It'd be 1 bus that would stop before and after school. So like I said, we have some graphics for you. We're excited about the programs that we could provide in the space. We have here with us tonight 2 representatives of our architectural firm, also our legal counsel, Brian Crowley, and our Director of Special Education, Dr. Lene Walls. So certainly she can speak to any programmatic questions. But we really believe in the importance of the proximity of the location to our campus. We are completely landlocked, and we don't have enough practice fields right now. We couldn't take up any of the space that we have to build on it. And again, when we looked at this property, we really looked at the neighbors in that property, the Kinder Cares, the Have Dreams, which serves autistic children and adults, the Goldfish Swim School, Erie Family Health, and the fact that it's 3 blocks from our campus. So location is really important to us, but we did not take that lightly, and we want you all to know that. So we do have other people signed up to speak, but it was just in case there were questions that involved knowledge outside of mine, so I'm not sure what we do next. Sorry. Yeah, sure. Brian Crowley, our attorney.
Good evening. My name is Brian Crowley. I'm the attorney for the school district. There was one thing I just wanted to add, because in your task tonight, beyond our unique use is the precedential value of this. Because when you have a text amendment, that's going to apply to other future uses. And the one thing that we are sensitive to, aware of, in the I-2 industrial district is a main purpose of that is tax base. And beyond Mary's strong point that we're leasing this property, so in this very use, there's not a tax issue. If you'll notice in the definition that we put forth, if District 65 comes forward, if we come forward again and want to purchase a piece of land in that area and provide for a similar type of use here, it states in there that we have to pay real estate taxes and cannot seek an exemption. So we're committed to that. And I know there's been a concern on the city council side of this because of past litigation and such, and we want you to just be aware of that issue. And we're aware of it, we're sensitive to it, and we're comfortable with that being part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have questions for staff first? Is that your light, Commissioner Lewis?
So this is for staff, huh? So we're considering 3 options or 2 options. There's the rezoning, the text amendment via letting a special use or including educational, public education as a special use, or having a different definition added as a special use, the special education use. That's 3 options that we're considering?
Technically, it's 2, because we don't have a definition that works for what this particular use is. So it would have to be combined to having that new definition. And then
It's not just public education? I mean, it's public education, right? It's ETHS. So, I mean, that's one possibility. Then there's the new definition that they've proposed, and then there's the rezoning of the property as the third option.
as a third.
Okay, all right.
Well,
just-
wait a minute. Let me try a question to the school. You're proposing a new definition. Is part of the problem you're trying to solve by offering a new definition the fact that the existing definition of an educational institution public is defined as a publicly owned, and you're proposing to use a leased property? Is that a critical difference? See, I think, Commissioner Lewis, it looks to me as though there are only 2 options. Because the public, if this is the case, then educational institution public, you'd have to redefine that in order to handle leased property, would you not?
Well, I'm certainly not the attorney, but to answer your question from my point of view, we were told when we applied for the special use permit that we were denied because we are a public education institution, or whichever way that wording went. But we were also asked to specifically define the use. So I didn't think
Okay.
that the issue would be who owns the building, because we would own the entity.
I think what you're suggesting is that one answer to this is that we could have a text amendment that allows for public education.
Correct, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
Plain and simple, yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought the special education was to limit it so we couldn't have every other school like a Skokie 73 coming in and, renting space or taking over industrial space. Or I have no idea what the
It would certainly
intent
narrow
was.
the-
Yeah.
it narrows
It would
the envelope.
Narrow the envelope, right. Make it so not a lot of people could.
I mean, we
could
we
use
have
it.
we have a very specific use that we want for this property, and in working with staff in the city, we understand the sensitivity about the I-2. And so we are willing to, listen, if there was support for that, we'd be fine with that, but we're also understanding of the fact that there's a tax issue, and that we're willing to be as specific as possible, and there's not a real desire, we think, on the city's part to have a broader educational use in that area.
So,
Make sense?
okay.
I just wanted to point out that, when it comes to public education institution, I think the only 2 players in that ballgame that would be looking to do that is District 202 and 65. And 65 already has multiple locations throughout the city. So we felt that it was unique enough by saying public education institution, but as Brian said, we also wanted to be sensitive to the concerns about very specific use for the space, that really fits our need, and also the property tax issue. So wanted to make sure that what we were proposing would not allow for any loss of property tax revenue to any of us.
Okay. So my second question was to staff was, what would be the downside of just, I mean, there is daycare that's allowed within this zoning district as a special use. I mean, there's very similar uses that are non-industrial within it, so what would be the downside that you would see to just simply adding public education as a permitted use? I mean, is there any staff? I don't want to put anyone on the spot.
Good evening, Scott Mangum, Planning and Zoning Administrator. So I think some of the potential concern, I think we've outlined kind of the comprehensive plan, you could read it sort of both ways on this issue, would be allowing additional non-industrial uses within the I-2 district, where the purpose of the district is industrial type uses, manufacturing, job creation, property tax.
Yeah. But as I pointed out,
So
there's
that-
already some other special
So that
uses.
one of your concerns, if I understand this correctly, is that the text amendment would theoretically allow a similar use anywhere else in the I-1 or I-2.
I too.
Yes?
Just I-2.
Just I-2.
Correct. The text amendment as proposed applies to all I-2 properties within the city.
Okay. Well, now, Megan, can we go back to the slide that showed the uses?
Yeah.
That,
There we
no,
go.
next one. The uses in the building. Right, now, in an I-2, I get Temperance. I get Allegra, Tapes, Kerr Concrete, Sugar and Spice. But under how do Have Dreams and the Family Health Center,
Prayer Garden Ministries.
Evanston Kinder Care, Goldfish Swim School,
Yes.
under what zoning provision? I mean, presumably, if
Can we see the special uses?
how can they do that? Are they special uses, and where do they fit into the special use category?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't recall what the
Daycare.
Area Family Health Center was determined to be, but yeah, it was possibly office. But some of the other uses that are in that building have been there for some time and are considered legally non-conforming. So in 1993, when we did the overhaul of the zoning ordinance, there were some existing uses that became non-conforming, and some of those uses fell into that
So the
particular
history of
category.
this district, what was it before it was I-2? This building?
It was,
you know.
it was still considered to be an industrial manufacturing, but I believe that it was a little bit broader in interpretation, so it may have allowed uses that were also permitted in a business district or a commercial district. But with the overhaul of the zoning district in 1993, things got a bit more restricted.
And if I understand one of your concerns about rezoning the property, it is that if we were to zone it into a category which would allow the school to do what it wants to do, some of the other uses in the building would become non-conforming, like the concrete people or the printer?
Right, possibly, depending
So
on
that we'd be shifting some folks into a favorable category, and in the process, we'd be shifting some other folks out of the favorable
Yeah.
category.
Did staff look specifically at what alternative zonings would possibly fit these, all of these, including education, public education? Is
Public
there?
education goes in a raft of different
Right,
districts.
goes in a raft of different ones, right? So, I mean,
I don't think it's defined in zoning.
so, yeah, okay.
Commissioner Belisle, is this your light?
Yes, it is. To just continue what Commissioner Lewis was saying, one of the things that was mentioned when we were looking at the map earlier is this is a sizable building. And I would not be concerned about any concerns about spot zoning there because it's such a huge building with so many uses. Put that aside, my question, I want to get back to the tax issue. I think that's something that's that I really want to put to bed. If we were to, instead of creating the new use, which is very explicit about the tax, if we were to make educational public sorry, I keep messing up the name of the use, but would that potentially open the loop where, not necessarily this case, but someone else could be like, I want to do it, but I don't want to pay taxes because it's not specifically in there? Which then leaves us with really the need to create a new zone or rezone, a new use or rezone.
Well, as long as educational institution public is defined as a publicly owned preschool, or blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
that would solve the tax problem, wouldn't it? It's publicly owned.
Yeah. But we're talking about a potential lessee here. Somebody wants to lease. I might be trying to find an issue where there's no issue.
Yeah, they would, if they had the right to be as a taxing body, not pay tax, then they would have it in any zoning district that they would go into. So I just want to make one other question is, this is very limited kind of district, right? There's some railroad tracks where the CTA has their yard. There's the property that's over near the Shell or the yachting or the Target kind of area. What exactly is in that area? Do you know the businesses there? And then there's this building, right? It's not really more than this building. I had actually thought by the zoning map that it was below it, that little sliver of gray. So
Which area?
It is.
down below, is that between the two circles? Is that gray I-1?
That's I-1.
That's I-1. So I-2 is this building plus the corridor. Where exactly is this?
Can we go back to the very
Yeah.
detailed zoning?
Yeah, the
There you
detailed
go.
one, yeah, there we go. Oh,
So
so
this
it's, yeah,
is
okay.
Hartree.
So it's across
Yeah.
the street, so okay. So the little soccer facility over there and, all sorts of stuff, yeah, okay.
You've got a bunch of automobile-related
No, it's just across the street.
businesses to the north. What's to the south?
The dome. This is something the Evanston soccer uses. It's a little small thing. Yeah.
Okay, what are the uses on the south end of that I-2?
I believe that's one of the larger ones is C.E. Niehoff. Trying to remember the exact. There are some other,
There's a landscaper down in there?
right, there's
Yeah,
landscaping.
Right, yeah.
So there are a number of different
Okay,
Okay.
manufacturing businesses.
so it's, okay. So,
Keep going.
can we ask questions of the?
Absolutely.
So I'm interested more now in what alternative locations that the schools saw as places that, I know this is walking distance, but the difference, the argument you had of being able to participate in sports and things, I think would be satisfied by anything within the community in general. So what other spots? You said a place in Church, and what zoning was that? Where are some of you said two other alternative locations, and then I'm going to kind of try to be a little sneaky and ask about the property that's actually the special education property that's behind the stadium that has some open land. That's ETHS property that is potentially big enough to build a 20 or 40 student facility on, but
So can I answer the second question first?
sure,
And Dr. Walls may want to come up also, because I'm not sure, are you just speaking about the open land that's sort of near the
Yeah,
football field on
right, yeah,
north
yeah,
of Church
kind
Street?
Yeah, and south of the.
So actually, the open land that we own there consists of two things. One is a practice field for all the sports that play on our main football lacrosse field. And then the second piece of property that we own there is actually our nature center. So even though it might kind of look like a big empty space, it's actually a whole ecological system that exists there. And we're trying to make sure that we kind of do our thing and be a good neighbor with that. So we're trying to make some improvements
Just priorities, I'm just.
Right. So I hear you, but it's a really large body of water that would also have to be filled in. And Brian?
Yeah, just one thing to add to that, as far as when a school district builds a building, building, they're also subject to a referendum.
Referendum,
You have
yeah,
a referendum,
yeah.
so.
Any building?
Yeah,
Yes.
for school, for students. If
Really?
you're- Yeah. If we were just building an administrative building, we wouldn't necessarily, but if you're building it, and even if you're not using taxpayer dollars for it, you
Isn't
have to
there
go to.
So it's a referendum on the
Isn't
building,
there-
not necessarily on the bonds.
Correct.
I'll be darned.
Correct.
Yeah. Isn't there like a little outbuilding or something that you can do an addition to, like a very large addition to an outhouse or something?
An outhouse out.
Done it before.
So we do own a house that is on Lamar Avenue that was something we were approached to buy some years ago that really was a little corner piece out of which we own the rest of the property. That serves as two things right now. It actually is our transitional house for older students until they age out of the special education program, and it also houses a science nature center classroom. So certainly we would love to look at space that we already own, but I do think that, our enrollment is also increasing. We actually gained 100 students this year. So as you can imagine, practice fields and ball fields and
That's the
spaces are.
general education, not the special education.
Correct, right, correct. I mean, just our campus as a whole. As I said, we're already short. If you were to speak to our athletic director, he has trouble juggling the spaces that we have. So, with our population of students overall, that's increased by about 200 students in the last 3 years, probably a little over 200. We certainly don't have more space than we used to. We're also offering a larger variety of programs. So we certainly have thought of those things. And yes, we did, I think, pretty thoroughly look at 2 other locations in the last 3 to 4 years.
And what were those locations? Were
So
they
one
similar
was-
industrial kinds of things?
No, I would guess that they're probably both residential districts, but one was the old Shore School at Church and McCormick. We did a large engineering study on that property, and it would cost between $2.5 million to $4 million to utilize it. And the problem is that it's also a space that we wouldn't own, so it's much bigger than a rent payment. It's a much bigger commitment than we plan to make for the number of kids who would be educated in this program. And the other location, which was actually before my time as CFO, it was under Bill Stafford and a previous director of special education. But they had several meetings regarding the old Foster School location, and there were a lot of investments that would have to be made in that location, as well as existing there with other tenants in a setup that it's my understanding would have been very difficult to secure and make sure that the space is isolated for the particular needs of the students as well as the other tenants in the building. This particular space on Hartree is very, I don't want to say contained because I don't want that to have a bad connotation, but it's very, it's a separate entrance and exit, and it is a separate use from the other tenants, and so it's really a space that fits the need. It's designed with 5 classrooms, a recreational component, which is also required in the student's day. And again, I realize Evanston is pretty small land-wise as far as having kids participate, but as you know, there aren't a lot of open properties, and for kids who in some cases will be walking back and forth to be able to try to get to some programs after school or, something before school, it literally is 3 blocks away.
Commissioner Saul.
Thank you. I have 2 questions for the high school. Can someone speak to programming in this building and how you are going to select? I think you said there were 90 students who need special education, but how are you going to select the 20 to 25?
Sure. My name is Lene Walls. I'm the Director of Special Education at the high school. So of the students who we have currently outplaced, we look at who may be potentially ready for reintegration. And because all of our students are on individualized education plans or IEPs, at their IEP meetings, we start talking about the importance of bringing them closer to home, and the kids who demonstrate readiness and who have made the therapeutic and the academic progress in the other setting is how we prioritize.
In programming, or kind of what's happening in this building?
Sure. So it would align with the programming at the high school. All the curriculum would be the same. What we would be controlling for more so than anything is environment. Many of our kids with emotional disabilities specifically struggle in the large high school. And so because they have difficulty navigating the space, they aren't successful academically, and then that causes us to look for smaller environments, smaller student-to-teacher ratios, fewer transitions in their school day, and so the programming would look very similar to what it looks like at the high school, just in a smaller space with our licensed and qualified teachers. We're hoping to onboard dually certified teachers so that they're content area experts and special educators to facilitate the rigor that the high school offers as well, which is what we miss when we send kids to off-campus schools many times.
So this would let you, among other things, this gives you a little bit more control of curriculum
Absolutely.
than what you're getting in, I mean, not to diss Arlington Heights,
Right.
but
Well, we work with currently about 35 different serving schools. So that's 35 different curricula, different principals, all of that
yeah.
is
Okay.
different.
Thank you. Commissioner Goddard. Wait, Commissioner Saul, were you satisfied? Okay. Or at least done?
To piggyback on what Mr. Saul asked, so you don't ever expect to be able to educate all 90 of the students in Evanston?
Well, some students come back to the main building, so they don't need that intermediate step. We have about 15 kids now who are dually enrolled, so they spend a portion of their day at the private day school and then a portion of their day at ETHS. And we have 3 students for semester 2 this year who will fully reintegrate, so they'll come back to the high school full time. So it's for those kids who may need a longer period of time of transition, but who don't need to leave the community to be educated.
And 40 is the workable number?
40 would get us within the state target. Right now, we're about 3 times the state target for students who are educated outside of the main school. So,
Can I, on the same line?
Okay, go.
So one of my concerns with this existing spot being applicable is that it's not expandable. I mean, I don't really see it being, you're just gonna, it's probably appropriate for your 25 to 30 students, but then you're gonna start jamming kids in, and then if you want to ever expand toward this 90 or so, you're going to have to go search for another place or something. I mean, it's kind of a small space, and so I'm just, a little concerned about whether we're really solving your need, right? Or, with this big change that we're going to do,
So the size is by design. We don't ever want to be at 90. And the goal is to get closer and closer to have more kids fully participate in the high school. Right? So 90 is excessive. The state target for a special education population of our size is about 35 students who should be served outside of the district. And so, like I said, we're about 3 times the state target. And so our goal is to serve more kids in our district.
So your assumption or your hope or your plan of these 90 who are being served outside Evanston,
Yes.
you would bring 40 of them back into this facility. Some of the other 50 you would hope to reintegrate, mainstream, whatever the phrase is, into the main school, and that gets you down close to the state target.
Yeah, or they graduate. So we do have several.
Presumably some or more coming in.
Seniors who transition out due to graduation. We have kids who haven't yet been identified as needing special education service. So those kids create another population of kids who might feed the public day who wouldn't necessarily need to leave the community the way the other kids have because we didn't have an alternative or an option for them.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that there are certain kids that are better served by being in other locations, such as my stepson, who, thank you, you are serving. So, and I don't see him ever getting reintegrated. Yeah, right.
It's very individualized, case by case. You know, there will always be a need to collaborate with some other partners, but not to the level and degree that we are currently doing if we had a broader continuum of placements in the district.
Commissioner Puglisi?
I had 3 questions. One is, are you...
Is your mic on?
I think so.
Thank you. There you go.
Are you planning at all, would you ever consider bringing in other students from other districts
Possibly.
at this facility? Okay, that is...
Possibly.
Do you do that now at any sort of facility that you have?
No.
You don't? Okay. The facilities that you're sending students off to currently, are they operated by other districts or are they private?
So we have a few co-op partners, and for our deaf and hard of hearing program, that is run by District 214, I believe.
Okay.
Hersey, wherever Hersey is situated. But that would be it. The others are privately owned. They're private schools or public day schools.
Okay. So what I heard is that one of the primary attractions to this location is the proximity to the high school, so you can, is that after-school participation, and hopefully, if it fits, that the child's able to transition back into the main school, so that...
Sure, but not limited to after-school participation. The proximity also allows the kids to take more academic courses during the school day at the main building. So a kid could start at the public day school, periods 1, 2, and 3, and we would have a staggered school schedule to allow them enough time to travel to the main building to be in place for period 4, if that's what their schedule requires.
So that brings me to my third question. I'll save the rest for comments. But how do kids arrive at this building and depart, and then how are they going to get to and from this facility over to the main building?
Okay, good question. So the majority of our kids are walkers, right? So if they were in their communities, they would be able to walk to school. All the kids who are currently off campus receive special transportation because they don't go to school in Evanston, so we need to transport them there. The only time I see us needing special transportation for some of the students at the public day is if we're using transportation as an intervention. So these would be for the kids who may struggle with school refusal or truancy, and so we want to put some supportive attendance measures in place, and special transportation helps us do that. And what was the other part of the question?
I'm wondering. Yeah, I get that, but it's not exactly a pedestrian-friendly area.
So we own a little van, an
shuttle.
ETHS van, and we would have 2 safety staff who could run that shuttle to and from the main campus for kids who need to get back and forth during the school day.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Belisle?
Is there any requirement from the state to have any kind of outdoor space in the public education facility?
No.
Okay. So it is okay by rule to have a completely enclosed 8 to 3, never go outside, basically?
Well, it's not that they won't ever go outside, but we're required to provide a PE component, and our multi-purpose area will be sufficient for that.
Thank you.
What will this do to your per pupil cost? presumably you've got some build-out cost, you've got lease cost, you don't have transportation cost.
Right. So currently, as I mentioned earlier, we're spending about $40,000 to $55,000 just on the tuition component, plus the transportation, which can be pretty costly. So if you look at what our campus cost per student is, it's about $23,000. So,
Okay.
but that doesn't mean that students with specialized needs won't have a more per pupil spending than that. But certainly, as we've run projections, we want to make sure that we start out less than 40 so that we can, do this the right way. So, at about 22 students, it costs us about the same as it costs when the students go outside of Evanston. However, the money, instead of being spent, of course, we look at it as a positive, as, spending it on positions that we're creating in the community.
Sure.
But as the number grows from, 25 to 30 students, certainly our per pupil cost does go down. Will it ever get to the $23,000 that is our average? Probably not, but that's not necessarily what we would expect for special education curriculum.
Sure.
But certainly it becomes less and less than we're paying to send the kids outside. I do want to say, though, that was not our primary goal. It was always about the kids and being connected to the community for kids who are already somewhat disconnected by just leaving here every day.
Thank you. Okay, are there other questions for the school?
I have a quick one.
Okay.
How long would the initial lease be?
The lease is, the term is 10 years. And I do want to say, just kind of as a side note, that the landlord on the property has been extremely supportive. He believes in it like we do. We all thought it was a good match because of the other neighbors in the facility on the Dempster Street side. He couldn't be here tonight because he's out of town, but he's worked with us. We didn't realize that this process would involve what it does, and so he's been really supportive. So it's a 10-year lease.
Okay. Other questions?
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'm still interested in this the Shore School alternative. What were the major obstacles to renovating that? Could it be partially opened? Was it,
So it's way more space than we need. And so, as you know, ETHS is a gigantic place anyway, so we're trying not to be in more space than we need. We did have a pretty extensive engineering study done because actually we were approached to see if we had interest in the property. And like I said, the estimate was, depending on if you close off part of it, only use part of it, completely demolish it. The estimate was between $2.5 to $4 million. So that's a significant capital investment for servicing, let's say, an average of 25 to 28 students. We did not really see a use for the rest of the space for us. And so it really was much larger. And back to Brian's point, if we had talked to MWRD about possibly demolishing the building, I don't know what that means for building a school on a referendum, but it was just a really large space. And there were some questions about what we might get into as work on that space was done.
so that was considered a purchase property
No.
or as a tenant relationship?
Well, it actually, and that property could not be sold to us because the owner does not sell those properties along the canal. It's owned by the Metropolitan
Oh, it is
Water.
owned by MWRD.
I see.
Yeah, they don't. They're not interested in selling it.
No, of course not.
It would have been a 40-year,
40-year
basically.
ground lease or something.
Yeah, at very little to no cost, but the lease cost was not our concern. So, on this property, 10 years of lease payments will probably cost us, $800,000 over 10 years. So the costs that we were looking at were significantly different. And again, it's not like we're looking to open a second campus for the freshman class because it's so big. This is a very specialized population, and that's a really large building.
It's zoned, and that's zoned.
I think it's a
open.
residential. Oh.
Well, it's green, right? Is that zoned O?
Up along the canal?
Yeah, canal.
Is it?
Open space.
Yeah.
So is public education out of curiosity a permitted use? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Questions for the schools? Do you all want to make any closing statement? You're good? Okay. Alderman Rainey, do you wish to say anything?
I'm not allowed. I believe I'll be thinking.
Okay. Yes, this one will come to you in some form or another. Okay, thank you. We're glad to have you here. Staff, you want to make any closing statement?
I don't have any closing statements. I don't know if
Okay, then we will close the public record on this and proceed to, wait a minute, I got a light. Question?
I had a question for the law department. I don't know if this
Okay.
is the time or later.
Might's well, sure.
In our packet, there is a memo regarding a previous case. And I know that school was private, but besides that, could you talk to any differences between this case and what's before us tonight and the previous case that was denied?
Yeah, the primary, again, Mario Tretto, Assistant City Attorney, the primary difference is the map amendment application. And in this case, you are all evaluating a text amendment. In that case, there was a pretty lengthy opinion. It was for the JDBY case, and the judge found in favor of the city on all counts. But again, like I said, that was related to a map amendment, and what's before you is a text amendment. That memo that I drafted was dated early October, and that was when a map amendment proposal was being reviewed by city staff.
Anything else? Okay, then we will close the public record at 8 o'clock and proceed to deliberation. Commissioner Pagotzi, I think you had something else that you were holding in reserve, and now would be the time.
No, actually, my question was answered by Commissioners.
Okay. As long as I'm looking at you, though, do you want to say anything about the project?
Sure. I think I completely understand ETHS's position. It makes sense for ETHS, and it makes sense for their operations, and it benefits kids. It benefits the taxpayer. But I'm very troubled by the memo and the precedent, and what this might do to the city's standing in terms of enforcement.
This is the law department memo that troubles you. Okay. Commissioner Lewis.
Okay. Well, I also believe that it's a very worthy thing that the school district's trying to do, and think that it's something that we should work hard to try to resolve the issues that seem to be at hand in making it happen, which seem to be not so easy to resolve textually. I think we're down to two alternatives on how to do a text amendment if we're going to make this happen in a way. And it doesn't, the things that I find kind of not so bothersome are, one, that this is not that extensive of a district, that I can't see the reality of it being abused. You know, if we were to allow this special use within this district, I see very little risk of it being abused within more than a few thousand square feet in the future, at some point. But it is kind of a bothersome precedent. It's a limited zoning district. There's not that many public education people that are potential users. So the other thing that's a little bit that speaks for them is that the reality of this building and this district is it seems to be peppered with non-industrial uses anyway. It's whether they were historically there or not. So I would like to figure out a way that this could happen, but would like to kind of, talk through how the possibilities would go.
Commissioner Belisle, is this your light?
It is my light, but if you want to keep going in order, I'm happy to.
No, go
let-
ahead. Your
okay.
light's on.
Commissioner Lewis did talk to something that I have difficulty, is that if you look at what are the uses that are allowed in an I-2 versus what's in the actual building right now, there's very few that match. And it's hard to, and looking also at the standards, the second one on the list, if you don't consider what's already in the building, it's the existing, well, it's just difficult to make a decision based on a building that's got a bunch of non-conforming use, legally non-conforming uses. And thinking more of the general purpose of the building, I was struck by something, and not being an education expert whatsoever, that the fact that it is smaller and in a good way contained is actually very positive for the population that we're trying to serve here, as opposed to a high school that's bigger than the university I went to. That's very commendable that we're trying to do something about this, and it makes sense, even though it looks to be a little enclosed, that it's what is needed. But again, it becomes a difficult decision on specifically the standards versus the goodwill, if I want to summarize my. So those are my comments.
Okay. Commissioner Saul, anything to say?
I'm struggling with this one a little bit. I support the proposed use, but thinking about the amendment not just for this particular use, the concept of having education in an industrial zone doesn't fully sit well with me. So, so still trying to sort that out.
Can I just comment about education in an industrial zone? I mean, that it's very common for vocational schools and other kinds of that are related to high school level educations, auto mechanic shops, people who are learning fire trades, also all sorts of things are within industrial zones. But
I didn't hear the vocational or trades piece of what's being proposed here, but that's right. This just seems like a school. It just happens to be. So
Well,
that's my
but
issue.
I'm sorry.
You don't have to agree with me.
Yeah, under the definitions, a business or vocational school, which is defined as post-secondary, is a permitted use within the I-2.
Well, what's being proposed is
Special
not
use.
a
Special
vocational
use.
school.
Okay. So that the essential difference here is the age of the students, yes?
I didn't hear the vocational piece of this proposal. This just seems like a smaller school
Yeah.
with regular classes. So I don't know if that was not covered, but this doesn't seem like a vocational school, whether it's secondary or post-secondary. I did not hear that in the presentation.
And the definition part of it was basically final, that this is not a vocational school, it's more towards the other public.
I think the point was the body that it's serving, the populace, our students, our young people being educated in some manner. So I think that was the only point I was trying to make, is that whether it's for a trade or for mathematics or social skills or whatever is, I don't know.
We may want to come back to this in a minute. Commissioner Goddard, anything to say?
Yeah, I think this text amendment is written pretty narrow, so I can't see that there would be a lot of abuse if we allowed this to go in. The property's going to stay in the tax rolls. I think this is what communities do. One community body supports another community body. They've come to us with a reasonable solution to a problem they have. I think this is a win-win situation. They win, the kids win, and we still get our tax money. And as I said, the tax amendment is written so narrowly that I don't think this is going to be abused.
Thank you. I'm looking for, I want to go back to this question of vocational and technical, because I thought I saw somewhere in the paperwork that there was to be an emphasis on vocational sorts of things in this facility, and yet you have told us, I think, that you were looking at a general extension of the high school curriculum. It appears to matter. What are we talking about here? Yeah, yes, we'll open this to that question.
So our high school curriculum includes an extensive career and technical education program, and some of the programs that are offered within the high school provides for child care certificates afterward. We have a Chrome Zone where some of our kids are working on getting Google certified, and all of our students with IEPs at the age of 14 and a half are required to have secondary transition plans as a component of their IEPs. In the secondary transition plans, we talk about what the students are going to do for college, for careers, and for independent living. And so all of that is covered throughout the general curriculum. Now, we won't be offering hairstylist certificates or barber's licenses or things like that, but the ETHS curriculum is robust enough where we will be working on vocational skills and meeting the kids' post-secondary transition goals as identified in the IEP.
The language in the definition of business or vocational schools speaks of providing occupational or job skills in a variety of technical subjects and trades for specific occupations. Is that what you're doing?
We will do that. We certainly have a robust job skills program at ETHS. Many of our students are competitively employed, and that's through their connections at the high school. So that would continue with this population of students as well.
Chairman Ford, the phrase you just mentioned is actually in the proposed special educational institution public definition that's before us. In addition to classroom.
Okay, thank you. That's where I saw it.
Okay. I have it on top of my page if you want to see.
No, I got it.
Okay.
It's on top of page 3. So, except that the definition of business and vocational schools is post-secondary, and you are proposing to offer secondary, but a very similar use, except for the age of the students, is a permitted special use in the I-2. Okay. Well, but it was daycare for domestic animals, wasn't it? Different problem.
The daycare is non-conforming.
Yeah, that's one of the legally non-conforming. Commissioner Pagozzi, is this your light?
I just had another thought that's very concerning, and if you go to Indiana, which is next door, unfortunately, to our state, the definition of, and we talked about public education. Unfortunately, the definition of public education is starting to get a little bit harder to define because public dollars now flow in and out of to private institutions a lot more easier than they ever did. So, which kind of gives me, I want to help Evanston High School. I want to make this easy, but I'm afraid that by allowing this to happen, it really sets up a bad precedent to allow all kinds of different types of schools, non-vocational schools, to come back with an argument to say, hey, you allowed this, why can't I get what I want? And beyond the JDY school. So it's, it would be great to put in language that would make this a very special, limited case, but I'm afraid that at first I thought Commissioner Lewis found a very good way to do that with public, but now that I think about it, public education is really harder and harder to define. I just wanted to make that point before we got too much further.
I'll say that
Commissioner Lewis, wait a minute. Commissioner Lewis, a question? Your mic's not on.
Can either staff or legal talk to what charter schools are defined as is in the zoning ordinance? Is either public or publicly funded private schools? What are they?
But the definition that we're talking about here does say specifically facility owned or leased by a public school district. That takes care of a little bit of that.
Yes. I would think. Further comments up here? I think I hear us all being supportive of the use of the mission here. That's not a question. I tend to agree with I guess it was Commissioner Goddard, that the use here, I think, is defined narrowly enough that the likelihood of this becoming a precedent seems to me to be kind of limited. We can envision all kinds of slippery slopes. Of the slippery slopes that we have had to face on this commission, this strikes me as one of the lesser ones. As to the issue of the other uses in the building, most of us who live on single-family residential lots in Evanston are legally non-conforming. legal nonconformity isn't to me as scary a phenomenon. And the fact that there are other uses in the building that currently, that in terms of mission and sort of place in the world, line up pretty well with this use, seems to me in practical terms, right now, and for the foreseeable future, this building is only partially industrial. And I don't see us going over a slippery slope on this one. I am sympathetic to a question that I thought Commissioner Lewis was pursuing. In all of Evanston, one would think that there might be a better space. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. You could spend the rest of your lives looking for it, I suppose. Is there a preferable space out there? Probably. Can you find it from a practical standpoint? I don't know, maybe not. Commissioner Belial, your light's back on.
Yes, my light is back on. And this is a bit of a question I want to throw to everybody, but is the special educational institution public, the new definition that's being put for us, the fact that it is very narrow does, I think, stop any kind of potential abuse, but is it so narrow that somebody could say this is only for this specific project and we'll never be able to do anything else with it? And is that an issue? And if it's not an issue, I'm fine with it.
It is reminiscent of one of those...
Are we spot defining is the question.
Yeah, instead of spot zoning.
Yeah.
It's like one of those laws where Illinois cannot pass law for a specific jurisdiction, but they can always pass a law that applies to villages with a population between 4,004 and 4,006.
That answers my question. Thank you.
But it sounds to me as though, well, I don't know.
The other comment I would want, and specifically for that building, and this might be a psychology thing, but if the zone was called something else than I2, let's say it was another letter that doesn't rhyme with industrial, would we be so bothered by the fact that we are putting education in an industrial zone that happens to really not be that industrial right now?
Fair question.
Well, I wasn't worried about mixing industry and kids myself. I was more interested in job spaces and providing space for entrepreneurship and things that are, we've had hydroponics people come, we've had all sorts of different, businesses come, and wanting to keep the availability of property for that kind of, jobs generation and things. This does generate jobs, I guess, so maybe it's not such a big issue. I don't know.
Yeah, but that is sort of the reverse of the concern that I raised. In the whole universe of possible uses, is this the one we would most prefer in this location? Probably not. But there's any number of birds out there, and we got this one. Commissioner Saul, your light was on and then it went off.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth. I'm going to start with a question. Educational institutions, public versus private. I'm just curious if private educational institutions are allowed in the same zones as public ones. We don't have that information, but... I'm part of the reason for that question is what makes public special And so why are we considering public, besides the specific project, why should the amendment be just for public? What is the difference in terms of zoning? How are they treated differently, if at all?
Well, public schools are tax supported. That means we're all paying for it. We're all getting a benefit.
I'm asking a zoning perspective.
And most of the
I understand the
uses
difference.
separate public school and private school. That's just something we noticed for a variety of reasons, probably.
It seems to me if we're concerned about the slippery slope question, eliminating the public ownership aspect of this amendment and then adopting it would really open it up. I mean, at that point, we have, I don't know how many private facilities you said you have students placed in, but if I was one of them and I might want to relocate to Evanston if that's where my student base was, and here would be a space if we allowed this use in this building.
I'm not proposing that we eliminate public. I'm just trying to understand a bigger picture, how the zoning code treats public and private educational institutions. Because we're being asked to consider something specifically for public here. That's it.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. I don't have a comprehensive answer to it, but there are certainly zoning districts that are more restrictive regarding private educational institutions than they are for public. There are at least some, and it would take a little bit more time to go through all the 30-ish zoning districts, but some of them where it's a special use to have a private educational institution and a permitted use to have a public.
Some of the R districts, for instance?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
And a private institution could have come to ask for a special use to be added, and only the private one has been added to a specific zone where it wasn't there to start with. Kind of the reverse of what we're trying to do here.
I'm just sitting quietly waiting as people process this to see if there's anything else. All right, let's try this then. Does somebody want to move that we recommend to City Council, to the Planning and Development Committee, that the definition of special education institution public, which has been offered to us on page 3 of the memo, be added to the list of special uses allowed within the I-2 district?
So motioned.
Lewis, is there a second? Second. Goddard. It's my understanding that if we were to adopt this, and if it were to be adopted by council as a special use, it would come back to ZBA and then have to go back to council as a specific. So we would be establishing a general rule, and the specific use would still have to be processed.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. We have a motion to recommend amendment as requested by the school district. Any further comments on the motion? If none, let's call the roll.
All right. Commissioner Bilal?
Aye.
Commissioner Goddard? Aye. Commissioner Lewis?
Aye.
Commissioner Pagotzi?
Nay.
Commissioner Saul?
Nay.
And Chair Ford?
Aye. 4 ayes, no nays.
And 2 nays.
2 nays.
2 nays.
Sorry. The motion is approved. The recommendation will go back to Planning and Development Committee. Thank you all for coming in. Is there any other public comment? Any of you public want to make any other comments while you're here? It's just as well. Okay, I've lost my agenda. Thank you. Okay, I do need to say a couple things about schedule. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, the 29th, which is the Wednesday, the 29th, which is the Wednesday after Thanksgiving. And at that meeting, we will begin deliberation on the proposal for a development at 601 Davis. It's conceivable that that will be a one-session meeting, although that would surprise me a little bit. We need to have a meeting in December under the rules to elect a chair and vice chair for 2018 and to establish the meeting schedule. Staff survey indicated that we have a quorum on Wednesday, the 6th of December. We do not have a quorum on Wednesday, the 13th. I think staff are a little uneasy about calling a meeting on the 6th if the only business we have before us is the election. I understand that reluctance. Zoning Committee is meeting next Wednesday. If the Zoning Committee were able to complete its deliberation on the C1A district, then we could have that matter come to us on the 6th, which would give us an agenda in addition to the election. There's the possibility, of course, that we're going to have to continue the 601 Davis proposal. We could continue it to the 6th, although a one-week continuation doesn't seem to do anybody any good. The alternative would be to continue it to the January meeting. That, from my standpoint, makes it even more important that we get the election done in December, because otherwise you do the election in January at a point when you have no chair or no vice chair, and from a parliamentary standpoint that's easy to do, but you got to do it. And then a chair has to take on the second half of the 601 Davis proceeding without having gone through all the staff briefings. So it would be really helpful if the Zoning Committee could give us something to do on December 6th. And that's a matter of whether you can get something done on the 13th. Yeah.
I just had a question. I don't know the timing of this. Is it 601 Davis?
Mm-hmm.
Could that just happen on the 6th? Does it have to, do we need to?
I think we've noticed it for the 29th,
Oh,
haven't
it's
we?
too late? Okay.
Yeah.
And being on the zoning committee, I think we will be able to come to a conclusion, and we had or good enough to bring it to the whole commission.
Good. Well, that would be very helpful. And then we can go ahead and meet on the 6th, elect a new chair, and then I can go away. For whatever it's worth, my term as a commissioner ends on the 12th. So the 13th wouldn't, the 13th you have no chair. You would still have a vice chair because Commissioner Lewis' term as vice chair doesn't end until the 31st. So anyway, that's what we've got for schedule. Anything else we need to do?
No.
Okay.
That's it.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Goddard, second. Belisle. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.